We have a ton of news to talk about here today, including the potential of a huge Toronto and Vancouver trade. Plus, we have trade rumors concerning the Ottawa Senators. Is Johnny Gaudreau staying in Calgary? Is Carey Price done for the season? Is his career in jeopardy? We'll discuss all that. Plus, the NHL waiver wire. Sean Avery appears to be making a return or a comeback. Plus, we also had sad news in the Leafs organization regarding prospect Gaudreau Amirov. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a ton of news today. It's been an extremely busy news cycle in the NHL, so let's dive in and get started. First up, we have news from the NHL waiver wire. The New Jersey Devils have placed winger Marian Studnik on waivers. So of course, he's been in the NHL off and on for the past 2 years. He's appeared in 17 games, only scored 1 goal, so he likely will head back to the minor leagues, assuming he does indeed clear. Be interesting to see if another team wants to put in a claim on the 23-year-old prospect. Now, we also had a very small trade to discuss as well. It wasn't really worth doing a dedicated video on it, but the trade is between the Arizona Coyotes and the Boston Bruins. The Coyotes have traded the rights to prospect Michael Callahan to the Bruins in exchange for a 2024 7th-round pick. So that tells me that Callahan was very unlikely to sign with Arizona. They were probably aware of this, so they decided to send his signing rights off to another team. Getting a 7th-round pick in return obviously doesn't show much of a return, but it's better than nothing at all. Currently, Callahan's playing U.S. college hockey at Providence, so I would assume when the season's over, he's very likely to sign, and I would assume that the Bruins are pretty confident they will be able to get that done. Now, we also have some injury updates for today, including a couple in Chicago. Tyler Johnson appears to be ready to return. He should be back this week. Of course, Johnson, like Jack Eichel, who happened shortly after, had the disc replacement surgery in his neck, same similar type of injury. So, of course, that's a pretty good recovery time for him. So it'll be interesting to see how he fares out. Eichel seems to be doing okay so far in his return in Vegas. The other injury in Chicago, as well as a season-ending injury for former Oiler Jujhar Khaira. He had to have back surgery, and he will be looking at an 8 to 12-week recovery. So certainly, as I mentioned, his season unfortunately has come to an end. He's also had a couple of concussions recently, so it's probably best for Khaira to take some long time here to kind of recover and heal and see where things go health-wise before getting back into the NHL. A couple of news on updates on injuries on the Ottawa Senators front. Looks like Colin White's finally ready to return. He likely will return on the weekend, making his season debut. Of course, he was hurt in the preseason, another victim of a shoulder injury, which seems to be the trend in Ottawa this year. Of course, he went hard into the boards. This is almost very similar injury that Josh Norris is battling. And of course, speaking of Norris, he has resumed skating. I know they estimated around 2 weeks or so after the All-Star break is kind of what they're hoping for. We're getting close to that, so I would assume that we'll likely see Norris probably switch from a no contact to a regular contact jersey in practice sometime in the next week, and then likely, hopefully, if all goes well, be able to return after that. But right now, he has been skating for the last few days in a row, which is a good sign, and White's ready to go as well. Another interesting news item today came about from a few sources, including Dave Pagnotta of thefourthperiod.com, confirming that Sean Avery, a former NHL player, has signed a contract in a bid to make a hockey comeback. I'm not really sure if there's more to this, and certainly it makes you wonder. In the East Coast Hockey League with the Orlando Solar Bears. So, of course, Avery is a very outspoken personality. Certainly was I guess you could call him a unique hockey player, to kind of put it nicely, but of course, kind of most known for that situation with Marty Brodeur, where he was when the screening situation. He was certainly really like a pest player that got under the skin of the opponents big time. Wasn't real popular with a lot of the NHL crowd, given a lot of the remarks he made. I know former NHL tough guy Matthew Barnaby is also outspoken, saying that he would sign a contract with one of the rival clubs in that league to be able to have an opportunity to play against him and fight him. So I don't know if there's more to this or if it's more of a gimmick or what it is, but certainly interesting to see him, attempting a comeback here, into his 40s now. Former Anaheim Ducks general manager Bob Murray is returning to the NHL as well, which is a bit of a surprise concerning how short of a stretch it's been since he's been out as GM in Anaheim. But he's now working for the Calgary Flames as a scout. Of course, he was basically forced out of the role as general manager in Anaheim, basically accused of creating a very, very toxic work environment. A lot of people didn't have a lot of good things to say about what it was like to work with him and for him. I know that the ownership there basically talked to him and basically forced him to resign pending investigation. I know dailyfaceoff.com and Frank Saravalli attempted to conduct an interview with him, and he wanted to wait and have the team that he's working for now, Calgary, approve that. Instead, they ended up talking to Brad Treliving, the general manager, and essentially the story he gave, or the explanation, I guess, would be to say that, of course, he's known Bob Murray a long time, somebody who he's got to know as a young executive in the NHL, was very good to him, and he felt that he learned his lesson, learned his ways, has changed, and deserves another opportunity, I guess, to kind of sum things up. But if you want to go to dailyfaceoff.com, you'll see an interview with Brad Treliving talking about that situation. But amongst all the other people we've seen in NHL circles basically be forced out for various different types of things like that, or other situations that we've seen, we haven't seen anybody really come back that quickly. So kind of surprising in that sense, but hopefully nothing really ever comes about in the future for what we saw in the past. I know Treliving did mention that one of Murray's biggest talents or skills is evaluating players, and that's certainly something that they really want to lean on him for going forward. So we'll see how things go on that front. The Toronto Maple Leafs announced some pretty sad news earlier today, indicating that former first-round pick and one of their top prospects, Gaudreau Amirov, has been diagnosed with a brain tumor. Now, of course, he was in the KHL, suffered an injury early in the season, and while dealing with medical personnel in regards to that injury, started experiencing other symptoms after a long investigation and various tests, etc. They've come to the conclusion that a brain tumor is what's going on with him. Apparently, he's now in Germany receiving treatment, and we certainly wish him the best. Certainly a young man with a big future ahead of him. Not the kind of news you want to hear about anybody, really, but certainly, we want to wish him the best and hope that not only can he, fulfill his hockey dreams, but that he can get through this health battle, this health scare, and, not only, like I said, play hockey, but have a good quality of life, and that there's no issues in that regard. Of course, we don't really know the prognosis of the tumor. Haven't heard if it's malignant or cancerous or anything of that nature. No other details were revealed. So certainly, it doesn't matter what it is. It's still scary to hear anything in that area. So certainly want to hope and wish nothing but the best for Amirov moving forward. The Montreal Canadiens also announced today that they're promoting from within to fulfill a role as assistant general manager, and that's John Sedgwick. Of course, Sedgwick himself has been with the Habs since 2013. Before that, he worked as in the front office for the NHL for the league himself. He basically was hired in 2013 as the director of legal affairs, and in his new role will basically be handling a lot of the negotiating of contracts, salary arbitration, and essentially be like their salary cap specialist, if you will. A lot of teams have like a cap guru, if you will, and I believe he was already doing some of those things essentially. It's really more of a change in title, probably a bump in pay, but not a ton different about what he was already doing with the team. He'll just now officially be an assistant general manager, and I guess probably be compensated better for what he was kind of already doing. So good on him. And certainly from what I've seen around the hockey community today, a lot of people had a lot of good things to say about him. It seems like this is an opportunity that's well-deserved. Now, staying with the Montreal Canadiens, we have an update coming here in short order in about 48 hours on Carey Price. Montreal has scheduled a press conference for Friday to give an update on the Carey Price situation with his injury, rehab in the future, and you have to think that his season is likely over before it started, and at the same time, you do have to wonder what this holds and means for the future of his career. Could his career possibly be in jeopardy? I don't get the feeling that we're going to hear like a Carey Price retirement announcement or anything like that, but you have to think based on what the diagnosis was with the knee injury, the surgery that was had, the follow-up with the specialist. The last time we heard from Carey Price in the media availability, he had indicated that the next couple of weeks were going to be crucial for him to have a chance to be able to play this year, and if everything went well and according to plan, that would be the case, and he'd be able to play at least some during the current season. Well, right now, Carey Price has not been on the ice. This past week, he's been working exclusively in the gym. It seems like there certainly have been some setbacks. I know we haven't really heard much officially in that regard. Anytime anybody from the organization's kind of been questioned on it, they haven't really said a whole lot. But of course, the ones that would probably know the most are the ones that haven't been talking about it yet, which will come on Friday. But given what he's been through, I mean, we know going into the offseason, he had a hip and a knee injury that required attention, which is why he decided to make himself available to the Seattle expansion draft by waiving his no-move clause. And it's just looked to be a lot more serious than we ever knew. So clearly that knee is giving him a lot of complications. And considering how long he's been off, we were thinking about the last time he would have played a hockey game and how he would have had surgery. He's had plenty of time to recover. We're well past the timelines for that. And every time he's been on the ice and it seems like things are progressing, it seems like there's been setbacks. So you really have to wonder how that knee is holding up and what that means for the future of his career. I mean, obviously at this point in time, like I said, we haven't seen progress. Fair to say his season is not going to get going. I don't think Carey Price is going to be playing hockey at all this year, but you have to wonder the future. I mean, if Montreal ends up, with that contract, a long-term injury reserve, I guess from a salary cap perspective, if his career was over, it would certainly give them a ton of salary cap flexibility, which is good, but certainly not the ending to the career that you would hope for from a guy who's had so much personal success and obviously some team success as well, but not the ultimate goal of getting a Stanley Cup. I know last year's run obviously was special for a lot of reasons to that organization and to the fan base, but it could have been the last hurrah for Weber and possibly Price both at this point. Like I said, as far as whether or not his career is over, I don't have any information or reports to suggest that it is. It just makes you really question things given where things are at, how everything is gone. And even if there is a potential that it could be that case, I would be surprised if we hear the words out of the Canadians or Carey Price's mouth on Friday saying the career is over. But you never know. They could give a similar type of wording or whatnot that we heard from Shea Weber around his situation when it first came public, that the career was maybe in jeopardy. But I would think that the answer probably would be that he's not going to play this year. He'll continue rehabbing, have the summer to continue doing what he always does, and hopefully next year he'll be good to go. I don't know. It's just really, there's a lot of question marks, and you have to think that the end could already be ahead for his career if that's the case. But time will tell, and we'll get more information on that scenario on Friday. Now, before we get into the trade talk here today, which we're going to talk about the Senators and the Leafs Canucks trade, we do have also some news out of Calgary today from Assistant General Manager Craig Conroy, who was on Sportsnet Radio, I believe, doing an interview earlier, where he basically said the words when it comes to Johnny Gaudreau's contract that we're going to get that done. It's basically a done deal. So certainly makes it sound like things are pretty close, but at the same time, we also haven't really heard much of anything. And I believe the understanding between Johnny Gaudreau, his agent, and the team before the season, or at least when the season was starting to kind of get started here, that they would not talk about it through the media. We would not talk about it publicly at all. So you certainly have to think that there's a good chance that Johnny Gaudreau's agent and maybe even Brad Treliving are probably not overly thrilled with Craig Conroy's comments. Like, to me, if you're a Flames fan, you probably have, you probably like to hear that. You probably had some good optimism that it's going to get done, which is great. But until it's done, it's not done is the problem. And you better hope they get it done, or he's really going to look bad at this point. And, you also have to wonder, too, between the Johnny Gaudreau contract and Matthew Tkachuk contract that needs to get sorted out, they're not going to have much of a choice, depending on what they end up paying those guys, but to shed salary in other ways. So you have to think Sean Monahan's going to have to be shown the door after this season. He's going to have to be traded in some capacity, bought out, or whatever they have to do. And probably one other player, too. You have to think the future of Andrew Mangiapane might be in doubt as well. Depending on what else they do, of course. They might find other ways to kind of work around things, but at the end of the day, it sounds pretty confident from the assistant general manager of the Flames that Johnny Gaudreau will indeed be remaining in Calgary, and a contract could be coming soon. I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see if that comes to be true. Now, Bruce Garriock was reporting last night during the Senators Wild game that, of course, we already knew that the Wild and Senators have been doing a lot of scouting week to 10 days leading up to last night's game. And, of course, last night to get to see each other firsthand as well. But there's a lot of talk that we could be seeing a Minnesota-Ottawa trade in the near future. But based on what Garriock was saying, it's probably not going to happen until the offseason, assuming it does take place at all. He believes that the main piece involved here is Kevin Fiala. The Minnesota Wild, as we know, are going to be facing a bit of a cap crunch as the buyout of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter really kick in next year, and it really inhibits the Wild's cap ability. So, of course, that's going to take a chunk out of what they can spend on actual players playing for them. Kevin Fiala is a pending RFA. They had a contentious negotiation last offseason. And as I mentioned before, I honestly feel there's a good chance Fiala does get moved. I know he's had a lot of good chemistry recently with Matthew Boldy and been rejuvenated by that, and his stats are picking up. And really, he's not having a bad year anyways, but certainly, you have to think that the real possibility does exist that he won't be in Minnesota next season. And Ottawa does make a lot of sense. They certainly could benefit from another top six forward there based on what they have through their rebuild. And another guy who's a little bit, more mature than an entry-level player would be a huge help to that franchise and add some more secondary scoring. So I can understand the need from both sides. Hard to say what kind of return we're looking at. I would assume that maybe that could be a draft day deal. The Senators will have a fairly high pick. Maybe it's a pick, but where the Wild are looking to shed salary in that regard, I don't know that they'd really want to take much of anything off the roster. So we'll have to see what kind of talks progress there. There's also been some rumors that for the upcoming playoff run and the trade deadline that the Wild apparently were reported to have interest in Chris Tierney, who could certainly add to their center depth in a bottom six role for the playoffs. So we might even see multiple deals with Ottawa and Minnesota over the next few months. It's hard to say, and of course, no guarantee any of this comes to fruition, but it seems like Ottawa's got eyes on Fiala, and certainly Guerin knows between the first-round pick and prospects that Ottawa would have a lot to offer, so pretty good chance we see a deal from them down the road. Now, could we see a Canucks and Leafs trade, and a significant one at that? According to Elliotte Friedman, talking on the broadcast last night, he indicated that if he were Toronto, he'd be going all in on JT Miller. Now that it does appear that Jake Muzzin will indeed be going to long-term injury reserve, the Leafs have not officially placed him on LTIR, but they made a lot of cap moves today, suggesting that they're getting right as close to the cap as they possibly can, which would be when they would do the LTIR. You want to get as close to you can to having zero space so you can maximize that contract that you're placing on long-term injury reserve. So they placed, Sandin had to be demoted, and they called up a couple of other prospects, and they were down to like $9,000 in salary cap space. It's pretty tight. So that to me tells me that an LTIR placement of Muzzin is likely coming here in short order, and then they can go out and make a trade to replace him, or possibly even more than that, depending on what kind of value they can find in different contracts. And of course, in the case of JT Miller, he's making enough money that if they did that, it would make sense, right? I mean, everybody, I think it's fair to say, based on what Elliotte Friedman is saying, he's not saying that he has sources saying that Vancouver and Toronto are talking or that it's being discussed. He's just saying if he were Toronto, that's what he would do. So we're just talking about that as an opinion piece. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I know I've seen Canucks fans saying that if a Miller trade to Toronto was going to take place, it would have to involve multiple pieces, including being centered around one of their top prospects, and that's finished right shot defenseman Topi Niemela. So, I mean, that would be a great pickup for Vancouver. It's exactly what they need long term. Imagine him playing top pair minutes with Quinn Hughes. That would be a huge boost for the Canucks. And of course, that would be more than just him coming back, but he could be the centerpiece of a package involving Vancouver and Toronto doing that kind of deal. Maybe a first-round pick is in there. Maybe they look at Nick Robertson. Maybe there's something else. I'm not sure exactly what it would take to get Miller, but I know Vancouver would certainly demand a pretty high asking price. And Friedman's rationale here is that Miller's the kind of guy that Toronto needs. He's a guy who can drag your team into the fight. He's hardworking. He seems to have a lot of success. He's just a good team guy and not afraid to play that physical, gritty style that they don't have a lot of as well. And to me, I agree. He could be that missing ingredient, and he comes with term as well, so he's not just a rental. I know the Leafs have been reluctant to trade their first-round pick on a rental. Dubas has made it known that that's not really something he wants to do. But in the case of a hockey trade where he gets a guy for more than just a playoff run, they probably would consider that. So, it could be a really good, solid move. But, of course, we don't know for sure what Vancouver is going to do. A lot of rumors around Miller, Besser, Garland, etc. I think there's a pretty good chance they do trade a forward. Whether or not it's Miller or somebody else, it's really difficult to say at this point. But if a team like Toronto comes calling to Jim Rutherford with that kind of a package, that might be tempting for them to do. Right? Like as I mentioned before, I honestly think they would get a better return on Miller than Besser, because Besser's going to come with a bigger contract. It's going to be a bigger commitment in a longer term, considering where his qualifying offer is and everything next year. Even though he's a little bit younger than Miller, I just don't know. I think they might be able to demand more for Miller just because of the contract and everything that comes with him. Hard to say. Besser would get a pretty good haul as well. I don't know. It's really hard to say, but it's an interesting concept. Could we see two Canadian clubs pull off a blockbuster trade? It does make a lot of sense, but does Toronto want to do that? Does Vancouver want to do that? I do think that it's something they should probably discuss, but whether it happens, it's really difficult to say. But let me know your thoughts on the possibilities down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.